was sleeping in my truck behind a Dollar General when the letter arrived at the motel I'd been kicked out of 3 days earlier. The manager, Dwayne, called me at 6 in the morning, waking me from another nightmare about Veronica's lawyer. "Mitchell," he said, "you got a certified letter here from some law firm in Maine. Looks important." My grandmother, Beatrice, had been dead for 2 weeks before anyone bothered to tell me. We hadn't spoken in 20 years, not since I was 28 and tried to ask her about my mother at my wedding. She'd hung up on me then, just like my father would hang up on me 40 years later when I told him I was driving to Maine. The letter was simple. "Come immediately. You've inherited everything. There are conditions." Everything turned out to be a 200-year-old mansion on 1,000 acres of Maine forest and $340 million in accounts I didn't know existed. But when I finally stood in that house, when I opened the locked room on the 3rd floor and found 40 years of evidence my grandmother had collected, I understood why my entire family had been lying to me since I was 8 years old. My name is Mitchell Harwood. 3 months ago, I was a successful marine biologist with a wife named Veronica, 2 kids I loved more than life itself, and $1.8 million in savings. Today, I own one of the largest private estates in New England, and enough money to buy a small country. But I'd trade every penny to go back and save my mother from what my father and uncle did to her. This is the story of how losing everything I thought mattered led me to find the one thing that actually did. The truth about why my mother disappeared when I was 8, and why my grandmother spent the next 40 years preparing her revenge from a mansion by the sea. 6 months ago, I had a life that looked perfect from the outside. Every morning at 5:45, I'd wake up in our 4-bedroom colonial in Charleston's old village, the one with the wraparound porch and the 100-year-old oak tree that Ruby loved to sketch. I'd make coffee in the kitchen Veronica had renovated last year, all white marble and steel appliances that cost more than most people's cars. By 6:15, I'd be on my morning run along the harbor, watching the shrimp boats head out while the sun painted the water gold. My name is Mitchell Harwood, and at 48 I thought I had everything figured out. I ran a successful marine biology consultancy specializing in sea turtle migration patterns. Sounds boring, but it paid well. Oil companies needed environmental assessments, coastal developers needed habitat surveys, and universities needed someone who could track tagged turtles across 3,000 miles of ocean. I was that guy. The guy who could tell you exactly where a loggerhead turtle would surface 6 months from now, but couldn't see that his wife was meeting her lover every Tuesday and Thursday while I was analyzing data at my harbor office. Veronica and I had been married 19 years. She was a real estate agent, one of the best in Charleston. She sold historic homes to people from New York and California, people who wanted a piece of Southern charm. She was beautiful in that polished way that made other men jealous at country club dinners. Blonde hair she had done every 3 weeks at a salon on King Street, tennis 3 times a week to keep her figure, and a smile that could close any deal. Our son Colton was 17, a senior at Porter God, starting point guard on the basketball team. 6'2" already, with Veronica's confidence and what I thought was my sense of loyalty. He wanted to study marine biology like me, spent summers working on my research boat, learning to tag turtles and read sonar. "Dad," he'd say, "I want to discover something nobody's ever seen before, like those deep-sea vents you're always talking about." Ruby was 14, a freshman at the same school, an artist who saw the world in colors I couldn't name. She'd sit on our dock with her sketch pad, drawing the pelicans and sailboats, creating whole worlds from watercolors. She had my mother's eyes, though I only knew that from one old photograph I kept hidden in my desk drawer. Diana Harwood's eyes looking at baby me but turned away from the camera, like she knew even then she wouldn't be staying long. My mother disappeared when I was 8 years old. One morning, she was making me scrambled eggs, humming some song from the radio, and by dinner, she was gone. Dad said she went back to her family in Maine, said the heat and humidity of South Carolina had finally broken her, said she wasn't cut out for being a fisherman's wife, watching him leave before dawn, never knowing if the storms would bring him home. Robert Harwood was a commercial fisherman out of Charleston Harbor for 30 years before he retired to Florida. A hard man who got harder after Mom left. He raised me alone, teaching me to read the tides and respect the ocean, but never teaching me to talk about feelings or ask questions about the past. When I was 18 and tried to find my mother, he threatened to disown me. "Some doors need to stay closed, Mitchell," he said. "Your mother made her choice." I had one uncle, Sterling, my father's younger brother who ran an antique shop in Savannah. He'd show up for Christmas and my birthday, always with expensive gifts and stories about the furniture he'd sold to movie stars. But when I asked about Mom, he'd get the same look Dad did, that stone-faced Harwood expression that meant the conversation was over. My grandmother Beatrice was just a name, a ghost who lived somewhere in Maine. My mother's mother, who'd cut all contact when Diana left. I'd tried calling her once, the day before my wedding. The conversation lasted 30 seconds. "You're Robert's son," she'd said in a voice like winter wind. "That's all you'll ever be." Then she hung up. But that morning 6 months ago, making breakfast for my family, I didn't think about any of that. I scrambled eggs for Ruby, just like my mother had for me. I kissed Veronica goodbye, tasting her lipstick that cost $40 a tube. I drove Colton to school, talking about the tournament coming up. I had no idea that my life was already over, that Veronica had been planning her exit for months, that the man I'd been having lunch with to discuss a $2 million contract was having an affair with my wife, that within 3 months I'd be sleeping in my truck, and within 6 months I'd be standing in a mansion in Maine, learning that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. The destruction of my life began on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I'd been out on the water since dawn, tracking a tagged loggerhead turtle that had veered off its usual migration route. By 2 o'clock, I decided to head home early. The data could wait until tomorrow. I wanted to surprise Veronica, maybe take her to that new restaurant on Bay Street she'd been talking about. I pulled into our driveway and noticed the Mercedes parked beside Veronica's white Range Rover. A silver S-Class, the kind that costs more than most people's houses. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Thomas Brennick, my biggest client, a developer who owned half the coastal properties from Charleston to Savannah. He was financing my research on turtle nesting sites, a contract worth $2 million over 5 years. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Ruby was at school, art club until 4. Colton had practice until 5. I set my keys on the counter, noticed 2 wine glasses in the sink. The bottle of Caymus Cabernet we'd been saving for our anniversary was empty on the counter. I heard them before I saw them. Sounds from our bedroom that made my stomach turn to ice. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling like a year of my life falling away. The bedroom door was half open. Our wedding photo watched from the dresser as my wife and my biggest client destroyed 19 years of marriage in the bed where our children were conceived. They didn't notice me at first. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, though it felt like hours. Then Veronica saw me. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised. She just pulled the sheet up and said, "Mitchell, you're home early." Thomas Brennick had the decency to look ashamed. He grabbed his clothes and left without a word, couldn't meet my eyes. I heard his Mercedes start outside, heard him drive away with my future in his passenger seat. Veronica got up, put on her robe like this was any other day. "I want a divorce," she said. Just like that. No explanation, no apology, no tears. "I've already spoken to an attorney. You should get one too." That's when I learned that Veronica had been planning this for 8 months. She'd moved money, documented every business trip I'd taken, every late night at the office. She'd told her attorney I was emotionally absent, married to my work, that I'd abandoned my family for turtles and research grants. She'd even suggested I might be having an affair with my research assistant, Martha Coleman, a 60-year-old grandmother who'd retired 2 years ago and lived in Seattle. The divorce papers were served 3 days later at my office. Thomas Brenwick terminated our contract that same afternoon, citing professional differences. Word spread through Charleston's business community like an oil spill. Within a week, I'd lost 3 more contracts. My reputation, built over 20 years, was destroyed in days. The custody hearing was the worst day of my life. Veronica had coached the kids perfectly. Colton sat on her side of the courtroom, wouldn't look at me. When the judge asked him about living arrangements, he said, "I want to stay with Mom. Dad's never around anyway." Ruby broke my heart completely. She stood up and said, "Dad cares more about his turtles than us. Mom's the one who comes to my art shows. Mom's the one who helps with homework." She was crying when she said it, but the damage was done. Veronica got the house, primary custody, and 70% of our assets. My attorney, who cost $800 an hour, told me I was lucky it wasn't worse. Lucky. I went from $1.8 million in savings to less than $50,000 after legal fees. The business dissolved. Nobody wanted to hire the marine biologist who'd been branded unstable by Charleston's most connected developer. I moved into the Super 8 motel off Highway 17. $49 a night, weekly rates available. The room smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. I applied for jobs at marine supply stores, bait shops, anywhere that would hire a disgraced scientist. Nothing. Thomas Brenwick's reach was long. By month 2, I was down to $10,000. By month 3, I was selling everything I owned. My research equipment, my truck, my watch that Veronica had given me for our 10th anniversary. I kept one photo of the kids and that old picture of my mother. The motel manager, Dwayne, was a good man. When I couldn't pay, he let me slide a week, then 2. Then he slipped an eviction notice under my door with a handwritten note. "Sorry, Mitch, corporate's watching. You got 3 days." I spent those 3 days sleeping in my beat-up Ford Ranger, showering at the gym until my membership expired, eating 1 meal a day at Waffle House. That's when Dwayne called about the letter. A certified letter from Maine that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet. I was too broken to hope for anything except another bill I couldn't pay. I sat in the Waffle House parking lot at 7 in the morning, holding the certified letter Dwayne had saved for me. My hands were shaking, not from caffeine but from exhaustion. I'd been sleeping in my truck for 3 nights, parked behind a Dollar General where the security cameras didn't reach. The envelope was thick, expensive paper with a law firm's name embossed in the corner. Quinlan and Associates, Deer Isle, Maine. Inside was a formal letter dated 2 weeks ago. "Dear Mr. Harwood, we regret to inform you of the passing of your grandmother, Mrs. Beatrice Thornley, on April 2nd. As her only surviving grandchild and designated heir, you have inherited her entire estate. Your immediate presence is required in Deer Isle to discuss the terms and conditions of this inheritance. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience." I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Beatrice was dead. The grandmother who'd hung up on me 20 years ago had left me everything. But what was everything? She'd cut off all contact when my mother disappeared. Why would she leave me anything at all? I called the number on the letterhead from the Waffle House payphone. A secretary with a thick Maine accent answered and immediately transferred me to Alistair Quinlan himself. "Mr. Harwood," he said in a voice that sounded like old leather and whiskey, "I've been trying to locate you for 2 weeks. Your grandmother was very specific. You must come to Deer Isle in person. There are conditions to your inheritance that cannot be discussed over the phone. Mr. Quinlan, I appreciate the call, but I don't have money for gas to Maine, much less a plane ticket." There was a pause. "Mr. Harwood, perhaps I haven't been clear. Your grandmother's estate is substantial. If you can get here, your financial troubles will be over. Can you manage that?" I looked at my truck, calculated the distance. Google said Deer Isle was 14 hours north. I had $640 left from selling my diving equipment. If I drove straight through, slept in the truck, didn't eat much, I could make it. "I'll be there in 2 days," I said. Before leaving Charleston, I drove past my old house one last time. Veronica's Range Rover was in the driveway next to a red Corvette I didn't recognize. Already 3 months, and she'd already moved someone else into our home. Ruby's window was open, her purple curtains blowing in the breeze. I wanted to stop, to call out to my children, but the restraining order Veronica had filed meant I couldn't come within 500 feet. I filled up the truck and headed north. Somewhere in North Carolina, I called my father in Florida. He answered on the third ring, sounded older than his 72 years. "Dad, Beatrice died. I'm driving to Maine for the estate settlement." The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then he spoke, his voice hard as granite. "Don't go digging into things better left buried, Mitchell." "What things?" "Dad, what are you talking about? Your grandmother was a bitter woman who never accepted that Diana chose to leave. Whatever she's left you, it's not worth disturbing the past." "Dad, I need this. I have nothing left. Veronica took everything." "Some things cost more than money, son. Some truths aren't worth knowing." He hung up. My father had never hung up on me in 48 years. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee. Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. The landscape changed as I went north. The soft southern pine gave way to harsh northern oak and maple. By the time I hit Massachusetts, fog had rolled in from the Atlantic, thick as cotton. I tried calling Uncle Sterling in Savannah. He answered, but sounded strange, nervous. "Mitchell, whatever Beatrice left you, just take the money and walk away. Don't ask questions. Don't look for answers. Your mother is gone. Let her rest." "Sterling, what happened to my mother? What aren't you telling me?" "Nothing happened. She left. End of story." He hung up too. As I crossed into Maine, the GPS led me off the highway onto smaller and smaller roads. The forest pressed in on both sides, dense and dark, even in daylight. Finally, I turned onto a private road with a small sign. Thornley Estate, private property. The road went on for 3 miles through the forest. Around every curve I expected to see a house, but there was nothing but trees and fog. Then, suddenly, the forest opened up, and I saw it. The mansion sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, a massive Georgian structure that looked like it had been carved from the granite beneath it. 200 years old at least, 3 stories of stone and timber with windows that watched the sea like eyes. This was my grandmother's home. This was where my mother had grown up. This was where all the secrets had been kept. I parked my beat-up truck in front of the carved oak doors and sat there for a moment, listening to the ocean crash against the cliffs below. Whatever was waiting for me inside that house, whatever conditions Beatrice had set, I knew my life would never be the same. Alistair Quinlan answered the door himself, exactly as I'd pictured him from his voice. Tall, thin, wearing a 3-piece suit that belonged in a museum, with wire-rimmed glasses and a gold pocket watch chain across his vest. He looked at my dirty jeans and 3-day stubble without judgment, just extended his hand. "Mr. Harwood, welcome to Thornley House. Your grandmother waited a very long time for this moment." The interior took my breath away. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, and a chandelier that looked like frozen starlight hung from the 20-foot ceiling. Everything was perfectly preserved, as if time had stopped in 1950. Quinlan led me to a study overlooking the ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlantic, gray and endless. He poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter and handed me one before sitting behind a massive oak desk. "Mr. Harwood, your grandmother's estate consists of this house, 1,000 acres of surrounding forest, and financial assets in various accounts totaling approximately $340 million. The brandy glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the Persian rug. 340 million. The number didn't seem real. Quinlan calmly poured another glass and continued. "However, there is one condition. Your grandmother required that you uncover and document the truth about your mother Diana's disappearance within 1 year. If you refuse or fail to complete this task, the entire estate transfers to the Maine Historical Society. He pulled an ornate key from his desk drawer and placed it in front of me. 3rd floor, last room on the right. Your grandmother said you'd understand everything once you read what's inside. I'll be in the kitchen when you're ready to talk. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed to the 3rd floor. The hallway was lined with photographs. My mother as a baby, a child, a teenager. Pictures I'd never seen, moments I'd never known existed. At the end of the hall was a heavy wooden door with an old brass lock. The room was filled with filing cabinets, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and a desk covered in documents. On the wall was a timeline in my grandmother's handwriting. 40 years of investigation mapped out like a murder board. I picked up the nearest folder, labeled Diana's Diary, 1985. My mother's handwriting was careful, precise. Robert's brother Sterling came by again today. They whisper when they think I can't hear. Something about the boat, about packages from Florida. I found receipts hidden in Robert's tackle box. This isn't fishing equipment he's buying. I read for hours, each document revealing another piece of the truth. My mother had discovered that Robert and Sterling were using the fishing business as a cover for drug smuggling. They were bringing cocaine up from Florida, hiding it in false bottoms on the boat, distributing it through Sterling's antique shop network. A police report from 1985, never filed officially but obtained by a private investigator. Diana Harwood attempted to report suspected drug trafficking. Claim dismissed due to husband's psychiatric intervention. The psychiatric intervention. I found the commitment papers. Diana had been involuntarily committed to Pinehurst Psychiatric Facility in northern Maine on September 15, 1985. The same day I remembered her making me scrambled eggs. The papers claimed she was delusional, paranoid, a danger to herself and her child. Signed by Robert Harwood and Sterling Harwood. Witnessed by a young attorney named Alistair Quinlan. My legs gave out. I sat on the floor, surrounded by evidence of my mother's imprisonment. She hadn't left us. She'd been locked away for trying to protect us. Beatrice's investigation was meticulous. She'd hired private investigators, forensic accountants, medical experts. She'd documented every visit to Pinehurst, fought every court for Diana's release. 3 years of legal battles, all while Robert kept me in South Carolina, telling me my mother had abandoned us. The death certificate was in a black folder. Diana Harwood died December 3, 1988, official cause pneumonia. But Beatrice had commissioned a private autopsy. The medical examiner found evidence of prolonged over-medication, negligent care, and suspicious bruising. Murder disguised as medical complications. I heard footsteps and looked up to find Quinlan in the doorway. His face was drawn, older somehow. I was 25 years old, he said quietly. Fresh out of law school, desperate for work. Robert Harwood paid me $5,000 to witness those papers. I didn't know what would happen to her. When I found out, I tried to make it right, but it was too late. Your grandmother never forgave me, but she kept me as her lawyer. Said she wanted me to remember what I'd done every single day. You helped them destroy my mother. Yes, and I've spent 40 years helping your grandmother gather evidence to destroy them in return. Everything you need for a criminal case is in this room. Your grandmother made sure of that. I stood up, my mother's diary still in my hands. She held on, didn't she? Beatrice held on until she knew I'd lost everything else, until I had nothing left to lose by learning the truth. Quinlan nodded. She tracked your life, Mr. Harwood, every detail. She knew about the divorce before it happened. She knew exactly when to die to bring you here. Your grandmother was a patient woman. She waited 40 years for justice. I spent the next 3 days in that room, reading every document, every report, every letter my grandmother had collected. 40 years of evidence that painted a picture of systematic evil. Robert and Sterling hadn't just destroyed my mother. They'd destroyed 6 other families connected to their smuggling operation. People who asked questions disappeared or had accidents. My mother was just the one who got closest to exposing them. On the fourth day, I called Opal Marsh, the caretaker whose name appeared throughout Beatrice's notes. She lived in the cottage at the edge of the property, a tiny woman of 78 who moved like she was still 30. She made tea while I sat at her kitchen table, looking at photos of my mother she'd saved. "Your grandmother visited Diana every single week for 3 years," Opal said, her voice steady but sad. "She'd drive 4 hours each way to that horrible place. They'd drug Diana so heavily she could barely speak, but Beatrice never gave up. She hired lawyers, filed appeals, even tried to break her out once. The courts always sided with Robert, a fisherman's word against a crazy woman and her rich mother. Why didn't she contact me after Mom died? Robert threatened to disappear with you if she tried. He said he'd take you somewhere she'd never find you. Beatrice believed him, so she watched from a distance. She hired private investigators to photograph your school events, your graduation, your wedding. She has albums full of pictures of you, growing up, Mitchell. Every report card, every accomplishment, she knew about all of it." Opal led me back to the main house, to a room I hadn't noticed before. The walls were covered with photos of me, my first day of kindergarten, my high school graduation, my wedding to Veronica, Colton's birth, Ruby's first art show. My grandmother had been there for all of it, invisible but watching. "She knew Veronica was cheating 6 months before you found out," Opal continued. "She had investigators documenting everything. She could have warned you, but she said you needed to lose everything to be ready for the truth. You needed to have nothing left of the life Robert built for you before you could accept what he'd done." That afternoon, I called Detective Raymond Walsh of the Maine State Police. Within hours, the house was full of investigators. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing money laundering through Sterling's antique business. Testimonies from former associates. A paper trail that led to 3 suspicious deaths beyond my mother's. Robert was arrested in Florida 2 days later. Sterling tried to run, but was caught at the Canadian border. They're both awaiting trial for murder, drug trafficking, and false imprisonment. At 72 and 69, they'll die in prison. I used my first $1 million of Beatrice's money to hire the best prosecutors in Maine. The second $1 million went to a foundation in Diana's name for families destroyed by false psychiatric commitments. But the real moment of change came when I called Colton. "Dad, Mom said you weren't supposed to call. Colton, I need you to listen to me. Everything you think you know about our family is wrong. Your grandmother didn't abandon me. She was murdered for trying to protect us. I have proof. I have everything." He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, "Mom's been lying about other things too. I know about Thomas Brenwick. I knew before you did." Within a week, both kids were on a plane to Maine. Veronica fought it, but the custody agreement allowed for vacation visits. When Ruby walked into Thornley House, she gasped, "Dad, this looks like something from my imagination." I showed them everything. The truth about their grandmother, about their great-grandmother's 40-year quest for justice. Ruby cried when she saw Diana's art supplies, still in the room where she'd left them as a teenager. Colton stood at the window overlooking the ocean and said, "We belong here, don't we? This is really our home. They've been here 3 months now." The custody battle continues, but my lawyers are confident. $340 million buys excellent legal representation. Veronica's latest boyfriend left when he realized the money was gone and wasn't coming back. I stand in Beatrice's greenhouse every morning, tending the flowers she kept alive for 40 years. Diana's flowers, waiting for someone to remember them. The truth didn't bring my mother back, but it gave me something I never had. The knowledge that she loved me, that she fought for me, that she died trying to protect me. Last week I got a letter from Robert in prison. 1 line. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. But here's what I learned in that mansion by the sea. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the beginning of finding out who you really are. I lost everything I thought mattered, but I found the truth, and sometimes that's worth more than all the money in the world. If you found value in this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that even the darkest family secrets can't destroy the power of truth. Leave a comment below about your own family mysteries, or moments when losing everything helped you find what really mattered. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of redemption, revelation, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us across time. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way home.